Good morning. Welcome to the nth day of coronavirus. Whether you're like me and you're still working, or if you're stuck at home going crazy, we're all in it together, right? I figured with people having a lot of extra time on their hands, we have videos popularity increasing, so maybe it was a good time for me to talk about a subject and make a collection of videos. Very personal to me, very unique to me as well. And this is a first video in my CDI experience. Now, chances are you already know what that system is if you're on this video. If not, I suggest you find a more basic, bare bones video or read up on Wikipedia or numerous articles out there talking about it to get you caught up with the general idea of it if you're really interested in all the details. Because this is more about my experience and how it was for me, well, you'll see. So we're gonna go back in time now. Imagine it's the early 90s. Realistically speaking, 93, 94. I don't think later than 95. I would have been 3, 4, almost 5 years old, probably about 4. You are my father. You are recently making a lot of money. You're a very tech-savvy person, always have been, very interested in electronics, interested in computers. Remember, it's the 90s, but even still, we have computers now, we have these things starting to become mainstream. You being my father is somebody who's very interested in up-and-coming technology, and now that you have loads of money coming out of your ears because of your new job is working out so well, all that wanting to take a chance on things, pretty low risk now. So you're walking through Sears, you go by the electronics section, you see that there's a new game system out. You're not much of a gamer, but your father has always tinkered in those sorts of things. He played the early text adventures. He played the Ultimas when they were out. So it's in your blood. Philips CDI. $800 in the early 90s. Big chance to take. Why not? Looks interesting. A lot of promise. There was a lot of promise to the system. What they were trying to do, I think, was capture the essence of this multimedia device that was really popular in the early 90s, late 80s. They wanted to have a system that would be a computer, that would be an educational tool for children, that would be a music player and a movie player. Keep in mind that the CDI, the later versions of it, the one that I have, the 220, was also a DVD player, basically. It wasn't DVDs, it was CDI discs that played them, and you had to get a special video cartridge for it to be able to play them. But it did that, and it was all the same drive. Stop! You play games, you play music, you play movies, also other software that was computer. You could get keyboards and mice for it. That was nothing that we ever had, but that was something you could do, and that was something that they wanted to do. Unfortunately, it was not very successful, and I think a lot of it probably had to do with that giant price tag on it, because that's even a lot now for a game system, now in 2020. So you figure you roll it back 30 years, that's insane. But that didn't stop Pops from getting it, and playing it, attempting it. I guess he probably only played it for a few years. I remember watching him play a couple of the games. I remember watching him play Tetris. He played Tetris for a while, as that was a pretty simple straight shot to play. I remember him playing Laser Lords, Kether, and that one was slightly later than some of them, but all of them are generally coming out at about 93, 94, 95. I remember it started out, he played them, because so I would have been 4 or 5, my sister would have been 6 and 7, and I would just watch him playing them, probably 93 really, because the memories go back so far. I see the screen. I remember seeing the intro, I remember seeing stars, I remember the game, I remember different things about it that were scary to me, but I really don't remember a lot of other feelings around it, because I know it was just that long ago and I was that young. He didn't get very far with the games. If you've ever played The Wand of Gamelon or The Faces of Evil, you will see that it is, if you look at it through the lens of today and gaming and the type of time that we put into games and the type of effort we put into them, it's not a logical challenge. You have a straight, and I'll talk more about the individual games in separate videos, but a lot of these side scrollers, it's all just one big painting, and there's no indication of what is actually a surface to stand on, so you just have to figure it all out by trial and error over and over and over and over. And him being in his 30s then and having kids and working, probably tried it a few times and said, oh, this is stupid, and gave up. Because I know once me and my sister, we took them over, and I would love to know what type of runtime I have on that console. There's no way to track it. Like, the hours that I put into it, they never tracked that. If it did, it would have lost it when the memory took a dump, which I fixed. But we took them over, and we started playing them all, and it really became the epicenter of our lives, probably more than it should have. But it was our main system. We got a Nintendo 64 later on, but that was later on, and this was very early on. And this was my first Zelda experience. This was my first really storytelling experience in a way that was hands-on that I got to explore. Again, I'll get more into these details on the individual games, but the ones that really stood out in particular to me were Laser Lords, Kether, The Wand of Gamelon, The Faces of Evil, Zelda's Adventure, which came along later, Lost Eden, which has a lot of really redeeming qualities, and it's still very highly rated. The graphics were amazing, the music is out of this world. If you don't watch the video I make on Lost Eden, which may or may not be out at this point, you should at least look into the game. Look at the soundtrack, it's amazing. You think about what time it came out, the graphics were fantastic. The story's really good, but the gameplay, looking back and replaying it, it's not quite as challenging as it was when I was 7 years old. Back then it was whoa, 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 so hard and so difficult. And also keep in mind, this was before we could find walkthroughs online, and they weren't making Prima strategy guides for CDI games, and if they did, I have no evidence of this anywhere, and we didn't have them. I don't think they had them. Because what I do remember, one, the CDI section at the Sears. Before the Sears closed a couple years ago, it ended up turning into the mattress department after it stopped being electronics, but I remember where the CDI was. I remember going there. I remember getting the Philips magazine, which talked about all the games that were upcoming and all the games that were just coming out. I remember Zelda's Adventure and Lost Eden came out in the same magazine. And you can look it up. You can see that magazine out there. I forget what it was called. I'd love to get my hands on a copy of it. I'm sure they're out there. Anybody finds one, I am in the slow process of collecting rare and interesting, unusual CDI things. So if you find anything like that, let me know. I have a couple things that I'll talk about in other videos. Check that out in my Zelda's Adventure video when that comes out. I have a very interesting piece of history pertaining to that game, which is unique. I worked very hard to get it too. But it was particularly interesting for me because you look back, if you go into Zelda groups on Facebook, a couple Zelda groups on Facebook, and just people talking about nostalgia, a lot of millennials talking about nostalgia. I feel like we're an extremely nostalgic generation. We are very aware of how these things that were in our lives very young shaped and molded how we do. For example, my writing style, my music that I enjoy, stories that I like, tropes that I put into the things that I write, they mostly all derive from what I experienced in CDI games. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but I can definitely see that going back. And there are certain things like, oh, I don't know. We'll break it down in other videos, particular videos. Like, I think of Kether a lot. I think about how I played Kether over and over and over and over and over to the point where it had been probably well over 10 years since I had played that game. And when I replayed it recently, this year, 2020, I still remember exactly the pattern. All the little rocks and spaceships and stuff going by. Exactly, I have it memorized. This one goes here, and then this one goes there. I know it, and the only way that I could have done that was by playing it over and over and over and over again. And I feel like I played that, like me and my sister, we played the Zelda games collectively. And I think she played them more than I did, because me being the younger sister, I was often the one that was sitting back watching her play because it was too hard for me or too scary for me. That was a lot of my early gaming, and I think a lot of us younger siblings, and maybe older siblings in some cases too, but for a lot of us younger siblings, our first gaming experience was sitting in the back seat going along on the ride. As I got older, and maybe she started doing different things, but CDI really was the thing that we did together, and it was our bonding time. Well, all day was our bonding time. We were homeschooled, but I have these distinct memories of waking up before everybody else, except me and my sister, getting before any of the parents. Sun wasn't up yet, sneaking downstairs. I remember at one point, I'd get up so early that I'd plug my headphones in to the CDI machine, we called it. CDI machine. No one calls game systems machines. My Nintendo machine. I guess it's the CDI, or the CDI console. I don't know, I still have a habit of calling it the machine. I plugged the headphones right into it. I'd be there. And that was just like so many mornings for me. So many years. So many mornings. The startup screens. The startup screens are like the most wonderful, comforting hug of a noise for me, because that was my start of a perfect day. I got up before everybody, I came downstairs, I turned it on, and I'd hear it. And then the game would start afterwards, whether it be Lost Eden or Kether. I feel like I never really played the Zelda games really early in the morning. It was mostly Lost Eden. And then when I was really little, I would play the kids games, the actual kids games. I had the rollerball. That was cool. That was so cool. That was really great because you had like these painting games. And, and I think I haven't really gone back and played them because there's no real reason to. They're not playable enough as an adult to get a good nostalgia value out of them. It's just like Mother Goose's Hidden Pictures. That was a lot of fun, and it was really cool. It was really nice to be like 4 or 5 years old and have these games on the screen with the neat rollerball. There were some story games like Sandy Circus Adventure. I loved that game. I thought the story in it, going back to story elements, was really nice and sweet. I replayed it recently, and it's really, really stupid. But as a kid, it was emotional for me. And me being a very emotional person, it's hard to say if it's nature or nurture that really makes us like that. I mean, I guess to a certain degree it is nature, but I feel like having these stories that to me were very emotionally compelling, had this power to them. You have Kether, where, that story is a nightmare. The game, they explain like 5% of it. The rest of it is just all these cool ideas that look really neat, but it's never explained, and the game is so short, it kind of loses like what could be really great. but I thought it was so cool, and it really branched off. They all just branched off into other things. And I just wonder if anybody else had this sort of experience with CDI growing up. I feel like sometimes me and my sister are the only ones. But it was unique, as everything else in my life has been. And I wonder if I had had a more mainstream system, would my life have been more mainstream? Or was it just meant to be that I would get this unusual system? At the time, we had no idea. I mean, it wasn't until, I don't know, not by the late 90s. I mean, we were well into having internet and internet memes before we called them memes, before the CDI really came out of the woodwork. The horrible, link cutscenes were around for a while before the internet really fed on them and it really became viral. So I had no idea. I remember having AIM chats with strangers, like we all did with people who grew up in the 90s. And I remember a couple times I would mention the CDI and like no one really knew what it was, or they would say, oh yeah, I think maybe I read about that online or something like that. It wasn't, now you mention it now, people are like, oh my god, those awful Zelda games. But you know what? There's actually a lot of really redeeming things to them, and that's why I invite you to watch my critical videos of the Zelda when they come out, once they're out. Obviously, I'm recording my first video right now, so none of the other ones are out, but I'll be working on them in my free time. Something else that I'm still trying to do is figure out how to get my CDI to get onto my computer. I can't figure it out for the life of me. And if anybody has suggestions, other than a camera literally on the screen of the TV, which is crap, I would really like to know, and I'm willing to go above and beyond to get this to happen, because I would love for you all to see how my CDI playing is. Most of these Let's Play, especially the Zelda games that you see out there, are people that have never played them before, did not grow up playing them, and therefore scream and cuss and throw stuff and can't figure it out, and it's a struggle. Me, I'm an expert at them, at least I feel like I am, and I can whiz through them really quickly. I know exactly all the little bit tricks and think it would make for good viewing. Anyway, that has been my introductory ramble. I will be making other videos talking about the separate games and how they influenced me and my life, and I certainly hope you enjoy. And can we talk about this remote? This atrocity of a remote?